Today we have Etty Anwar, who's going to talk with us about CSR in Finning, where he worked, and some other issues surrounding that topic. As a little bit of background, Etty was actually a master's student here. He successfully completed our Master of Science in Management with a focus in marketing. And as you'll see from his performance, it's an excellent program that prepares you very well. A little over the top with the plug, maybe. I'll be telling you a little bit more about the master's program too later on in the semester, because it is a really nice potential option for you all. I'm going to let Etty say anything else that he wants to about his background and just basically turn the floor over to him. Anything you need from me before I turn the floor over, Etty?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for the kind introduction. So I do have a few slides to kind of talk a little bit more about myself. But before that, I'd like to begin with a disclaimer. So just want to make sure that the views that I'm representing, even though I'll be speaking quite a bit about Finning as a case study, and I've also got some industry examples from other organizations, the views are my own personal ones. So just want to make sure that people understand that. And just some reassurance that no animals were harmed while I was preparing this presentation as well. Okay, so this picture goes back a couple of years and a lot less gray in my beard as well. Anyways, this kind of was a time when I was a product manager at Finning, responsible for a earth-moving product line, and you see a tractor tracker at the back end. So that was a product that I'm really proud of being responsible for. So in my career, I've held various, I would say, commercial marketing roles, mostly in the B2B space. A lot of my career has been with Caterpillar, but I've also worked for a number of other companies in the oil and gas sector as well. So that's kind of a little bit of background on me. Deborah already kind of mentioned that I graduated from the Masters of Science in Management program from UFL. And today I took the opportunity to kind of wear my UFL hoodie as well. I don't really get a chance as much. So I thought this was a good opportunity. But yes, I did complete that program. It took me quite a bit longer. In fact, I think Deborah was sick and tired of me in the end, and she literally pushed me through because I was doing it part-time along with work, and it had its own share of challenges and a full family, as you can see. In fact, my little daughter that you see with the It's Time kind of placard, she was born the same year I started the program. And then you can see she was almost 7 when I graduated. But again, it was all worth it. And I would highly recommend you considering that program. That does give you a good opportunity to go deeper into your area of interest and then do some, hands-on research in a question of importance for the industry and academia. So.
And normally it does not take 7 years, so don't let that deter you.
Yes, that's true. And in fact, one of the colleagues, who's cohort members who started with me, I think she was one of the shortest or the fastest ones. She completed that program in a little over 1.5 years, I think. Michelle, remember Deborah?
Yes.
So yeah, it can be done.
People complete in a year, actually.
Oh, in a year. Yeah, that was super fast. So yeah, you could do it in a year, but usually it takes around 2 years, 1.5, 2 years. That's a reasonable amount of time. All right, so any comments on why I use this picture in the very beginning of the slide deck? No comments. So again, that's the reason why I kind of put it up there, because I really want to encourage participation. Today is Wednesday, middle of the week, and it's pretty much middle of the semester as well. I do understand that things do get slow when you are right there in the middle. So just want to remind everybody that we are together for the next 1.5 hours. And in order to make it more fun and exciting and interesting, I would encourage everybody to participate. I know that I'm joining remotely, so that kind of makes it a little bit more challenging for everybody. But still, technology has come a long way, and please do participate. And I've built in quite a few questions and a couple of exercises in there as well. So would highly encourage people to participate. As I'm kind of speaking, please feel free to kind of jump in, and I would be asking questions quite a bit. So please shout out. I think the sound system is pretty good. If not, you can always come towards the front, or Deborah can repeat your question or suggestion as well. So please do participate. That's going to make the next hour and a half way easier for all of us. So do I have everybody's commitment to participate in the next hour and a bit?
Yes.
I only heard Deborah. Okay, so I'll take this laughter as yes. All right, so to kick things off, I would like to get a bit of a sense as to what your expectations from this session is. Again, Deborah already talked about that I'll be talking about Finning as a case study on CSR, but any specifics as to what are you looking for? And I'll try and kind of address those expectations as much as I can. So what do you like to know from an industry perspective? What are some of the thoughts, questions, or concerns in your mind?
I guess for me, one of the things that I find challenging, like it's always useful and good to know and understand about CSR efforts, and like it's easy to understand why it's beneficial, but I feel like sometimes it can be a challenge to convince management and to have them see it the same way that you do. So I don't know if you have any experience with that, but I think that would be really interesting.
Okay, good. How to convince the management, right?
Yeah.
And we'll definitely talk about, how challenging it is in the real world. And I'll also try and kind of give you some tips as to how to address those, but there are no easy answers. It's a difficult challenge, but again, for sure, I do have some examples from my own experience that I could share. What else? Anything else?
I'm kind of interested to know how companies decide what CSR to partake and what CSR not to partake in, because there seems to be unlimited options and limited resources.
Okay, good point. And I've got some stuff that I'm covering in there, so I'll kind of go a little bit deeper into this question so that we can address that for sure. Anybody else?
Marisa?
I was just kind of interested on maybe your perspective or experience with greenwashing, because a lot of companies can use CSR to kind of boost their image where they're still doing a lot of damage to maybe their product themselves or the company themselves. So kind of just what your experience is.
Okay, good. And definitely this is going to be covered in the discussion, so that's good. All right, so that's good. Thanks for that feedback. I'll try and kind of cover those as we kind of go along. And again, feel free. Is there anybody else who would like to share anything at this point, or maybe even at a later stage if something comes up in your mind? If you're on a certain topic and you got a question, you can always ask that, and I'll take that into account. So before I move on, any other expectations that you would like me to make a note of?
I think we got them.
Okay. All right, then let's just keep moving. So in terms of the agenda, I did kind of selected a few topics. So we'll go a little bit deeper into why CSR, why is it important for the organizations, what does it mean? Then I've got a few examples from the industry, and again, they will kind of give you a bit of a sense as to what kind of efforts the organizations are taking, and then we'll take a bit of a critical view on what's the intention, what's the impact, why are they doing it. That sort of a thing. So I think that will really kind of be an interactive portion and give you a bit of a sense as to how CSR is being applied and what are some of the real life challenges. And then we'll get into the Finning case study. And I've kind of used the last two sustainability reports as a base. And then obviously I'll be kind of adding commentary based on my own experience and my own thoughts, and hence the disclaimer earlier on. And then we're going to finish with the ethical dilemma exercise. So it's a scenario business case that we'll kind of walk through, and then we'll kind of discuss what are some of the outcomes and what are some of the strategies that we can take. All right, so why CSR? So that's a question for the group. So help me understand, what's your understanding? Why do organizations need to participate in CSR? Why do they need to take those on?
Yeah, I do have some ideas here.
And again, I mean, there were some thoughts earlier on. I mean, there was greenwashing, right? I mean, that's one that firms may be using it to primarily, brand themselves or get legitimacy and that sort of a thing. So yes, that's one. Uh, there was another thought around, how can we convince management to do the right thing? So that may be where the company as a whole is looking to do things for the better. So that's more in terms of what's their environmental impact and truly trying to reduce that. So that could be um, one reason why as well. So any other reasons from the group? Give me at least a couple.
And utopic idea is that the manager also feels responsible for what he or she is doing, and so wants to gain a profit, but also do something that's related to corporate social responsibility for the society, for the community, for the environment. And so it's like an ethical perspective, so a self-awareness perspective also.
Okay. There's the self-awareness or ethical perspective. That's why they're doing it, because that's the right thing to do. I mean, they understand and appreciate the ethical side of things, and that's why they are involved in CSR. Good.
I was thinking too, like it's kind of the idea about whether or not our government should take on taking care of the people, or the people should take it on. And organizations have a lot of power; they have a lot of influence and money. So when they're able to make these efforts, we see like really positive change in our communities.
Yeah, you're right, because organizations are powerful. They've got a lot of funds and money, and they can make a big impact as compared to if the government tries to do something or the community on its own. So they do have that financial means that they could use. Yes, you're right. That could be a driver as well. Okay, so I did kind of pick up a few ideas. Is there any other thought from the group? So one was, again, as you kind of talked about earlier, the greenwashing piece or the branding piece. So again, a lot of companies do take on CSR activities as part of their branding exercise. And interestingly enough, you will find, and in fact, Finning has been there as well, because from a resourcing perspective, quite often the person who is responsible for the CSR activities falls under branding or communication. I always kind of struggled with that, because I thought, okay, yeah, that's a small piece of it, but why is it part of the communication? But again, the link is where, because the companies do kind of see it as a great opportunity for them to brand themselves and get legitimacy. So that's why it kind of falls into that. So branding could be one of the reasons. Another one is a profit motives too, because again, there is a big opportunity tied to sustainability, because there are a lot of I would say, from a government perspective, there are some legislations, there could be fines, there could be implications if you don't do the right thing, or if you're not able to reduce your impacts in the long run, you might run into issues and have to kind of incur additional costs. At the same time, there are efficiency gains too that you can get. So if you kind of move over from older technologies to newer technologies, which are better for the environment, but at the same time, use less fuel, or less resources. So there's a profit motive in the organization too, and organization are motivated by profits to a large degree, so that may be a really good motivator for them, and that may also going to open the doors with some other customers too. From at a higher perspective, I would say, when you talk about organizations, I mean, they do have a lot of stakeholders that they need to satisfy, and that's the stakeholder concept. So one of the reasons why they get involved with CSR is that's being expected of by their stakeholders. So the stakeholders could be the community, the employees, just like the example we had earlier on, where one of you said, hey, how can we convince the company to do the right thing? So that's where the employees as a stakeholder are also asking the organizations to reduce their environmental impact, to do the right thing, to have a better outcome for the community, be more involved. So again, all these stakeholders, environmental groups are another one. So all those stakeholders do kind of put pressures on the organizations, and as a result, they need to respond. So that's one of the reasons why organizations also get involved in that. And we'll speak to that in a bit. I've got an example. We'll get in a little bit detail. The other one is like each organization, and you would have studied this concept, I'm pretty sure Deborah would have introduced that, the concept of externalities. Uh, so anybody want to help me explain what that concept is? What are externalities?
Unintended outcomes borne by people who are not directly involved with the transaction.
For sure. So thanks for that. So again, these are the, as you said, I mean, any outcomes or any consequences of the operation of an organization or business, which are not really part of the main operation, but there are certain outcomes. And these could be negative or positive. So again, the organizations are held responsible for the externalities as well, whether they like it or not. And this is another reason why they do get involved in CSR type activities to reduce their impact or counter the externalities that they are creating, or even get some legitimacy around it. And we'll talk about some of the examples that will kind of showcase how companies are going about addressing these externalities. And we did talk about this right thing to do. So again, I personally believe that, you know, organizations again are, even though they are driven by profit, but at the same time, there are a lot of good people in there too. And a lot of them do kind of consider what is the right thing to do. They may not have all the information and knowledge, and they may have a lot of other priorities that they have to kind of balance. But a lot of companies, especially I would say smaller organizations, startups, and newer companies that you find are driven more by doing the right thing, and that's why they get involved in CSR. I mean, there are a lot of business examples who are solely based on, you know, creating products ethically and marketing them ethically, or so that's kind of part of their business proposition. So that's how they are made up. So that could be one reason too. And the last one, and I think this is where I think this becomes really relevant for all organizations in my mind, is for their own sustainability. Because if you think about it, in the long run, I mean, the organizations are responsible for all the externalities they're doing, and they may or they might get away with that in the short run, but ultimately they will be held to account. And if they don't take care of it now, if they don't have that long-term perspective, if they don't take care of the sustainability, their own sustainability is going to become a question mark. So that, I think that's a very important thing to understand. And just to kind of bring this all home, if somebody asks me what is CSR to me, why do we get involved and what does it mean? So to me, I say CSR is doing the right thing with the long-term perspective in mind. So if you have a long-term perspective and you're truly trying to understand what the impacts are going to be of your operation, of your business, of your products, and then you decide what is the right thing to do, to me, that's your CSR efforts, or that kind of defines what you do. Any comments or feedback on why CSR? Anything that you don't agree with or disagree with, or anything else that we would like to discuss here? No?
Not right now.
Not right now. So, okay. All right. So any thoughts on the use of this picture? First of all, I find it really funny. An elephant who is pretty a clumsy animal to begin with, you know, almost dancing on a tightrope. So what comes to your mind? What do you think I use this picture for, or analogy?
I think the elephant is corporations that are trying to balance all of the priorities along social responsibility.
You're spot on. And that's exactly what I wanted to communicate, because organizations have a lot of masters. The stakeholders, I mean, there are quite a few stakeholders, right? So you've got your investors, you've got your employees, you've got your customers, you've got the suppliers, you've got environmentalists, you've got the community, government, you've got all these masters that you need to satisfy. And all of these masters have different needs, different expectations, and different requirements. So that kind of makes your job really difficult. And that's a balancing act. And that's what you need to do. And it's not easy. And that's where I think hopefully the discussion today can give you some ideas as to what kind of challenges managers face or organizations face in the real life and what are some of the ways you can go about it. But it's not an easy job. It's a balancing act. It's just like trying to cross a tightrope while you are a heavy, clumsy elephant. All right, so let's try and kind of go through this concept by using an example. Has anybody seen this picture or this site before? It's very close to home. This is a mining operation. Any guesses? You see the black product being mined, transported. It's not coal. Any thoughts what it is?
Bitumen from Fort McMurray.
So yeah, so this is the oil sands. So bitumen is the end product that they produce, but oil sands is the ore that they mine at the site, and then this is being transported to their processing plant where it would be converted into bitumen or heavy oil. So yeah, so this is the oil sands operation in Fort McMurray. The trucks that you see, these are the largest mining trucks. Just to give you a bit of a perspective, each tire is about 12 feet in diameter. So if I stand right next to one of these trucks, I would be, almost half of a tire size. So these are massive. They kind of carry about 400 tons each truck. So you can imagine how much material you're hauling. Now, they also use a lot of fuel. So they're also kind of burning a lot of fuel, and there's a lot of emission that they generate. And then the process plant is a different story altogether. So think of you being, or just think of this operator, which is a company which is in the oil sands mining business. What they're doing is they're kind of extracting this oil sands from the mine through this equipment, and then they convert it through the process plant into bitumen, and that's what they ship out through pipeline. So what would be some of the I would say stakeholders? So let's go through the exercise. Let me just kind of activate the polls everywhere, and everybody's familiar with how that works. So I'll just kind of activate it for first. Then I'll come back here. So you just need to take out your phones, go to this. You can either text, or you can just go to that URL and just type in your responses. Let's see if this technology works. And you can put in as many, but put one stakeholder at a time, and let's see what kind of a word cloud comes up. So keeping that operation in mind, what are the stakeholders for that operator or for that organization? So employees, environment. Somebody misspelled environment, so we have got two environments. It's okay. All right. Yeah, the environment employee seems to be the biggest ones coming up. I like the one NGOs, nearby towns. That's pretty good. Gives you a little bit extended view. Environmental groups, government. Yeah. So I agree. I mean, you guys are spot on. I mean, environment is one of the bigger ones, just because of the nature of the operation. So I really love the fact that you also kind of came up with the same conclusion. So that's the biggest one. Then you've got employees, communities, I would say would be a big one. So I'm a little bit, I know there are two communities, but community is a big one because it's also tied to the environment and it's kind of close by. So I would say that would be pretty big on the list. One that I find missing is the suppliers. Because again, a lot of companies, like for example, Finning as an organization is a supplier to this oil sands mining operation. So suppliers would also be a stakeholder. Investors, we already got that. So you got those. Government, we got that. So yeah, all these are the stakeholders. So that kind of makes the job difficult because everybody has different set of expectations, just like the elephant example that we had. Okay, so the next question, I'll see if I can get out of this. I'll activate the next question. And this would be related to the externalities. So this was kind of my list, but we already kind of went through that. So we already covered all of these. So now the question is, list the externalities for an oil sands mining operation. It's pollution. And please think about both positive and negative externalities, because there are positive externalities too. And quite often we do get limited to the negative ones. So do kind of think about positive externalities as well. Good, good, good. So again, pollution comes up pretty high, which I would agree, because again, there's a lot of emissions going out. You've got tailing ponds, a lot of waste coming out of that operation. So that's a big one. Resources, you are using the resources, environment, prosperity, that's a positive one. GDP is a positive one, positive externality, for sure. Degradation, stimulation, I don't, and this maybe is to do with economic stimulation. I think that's what profit. I don't think profit would be a externality, because profit is part of the business operation, so that's really tied in. So it's not an externality. That's kind of internal to the process. Environment, production. Again, that to me that won't be an externality. Jobs. Yeah, I would agree. Anything else? So one interesting one that I found was in the oil sands, there is a huge, because of the huge emphasis on safety, there is a heightened awareness of safety amongst the community. And that was one thing which was evident during the Fort McMurray fire a few years ago. If you remember, I mean, it was really, I would say, really astonishing how about 85,000 people were able to get out of town in the middle of that fire in a very disciplined manner. And I did kind of read quite a few articles. I did have a lot of friends too who were kind of part of that. But again, everybody was really amazed at how disciplined and safety cautious everybody was. And part of that was because of all the training and focus that they had at safety at their work. So that's a positive externality example. So anything which jumps out, which does not make sense on this list? Anybody who disagrees with that or anything missing? No?
R&D.
R&D?
Yeah, because that has a lot of spillover effects in the long run when things get off patent and efficiency and productivity can increase.
I would agree, because again, R&D, and even I would say there would be some R&D which is tied to the business. So again, obviously that won't be the externality. But at the same time, that R&D could also kind of spill into other areas too, right? And benefit the society as a whole. So that type of R&D would definitely be, I would say, an externality. Similarly, just the human resource that you're developing, because again, these organizations are training a lot of people, educating, the experience, the skills that they're getting, and then those people don't really stay in that operation for long. They do kind of exit, and in some cases exit the industry as well. So that could be a positive externality as well, because you're getting a lot of educated, safety cautious, experienced, skilled people that you could use somewhere else in some other industries. Good. So I had this, again, one of the negative one was drugs, could be one too. And again, I've been in Fort McMurray and there's a lot of money there too. And so I've kind of seen drug being an issue as well. Uh, and R&D, I had that on the list too. And we talked about safety and education as well. So yeah, so these are some of the externalities for this operation. Now, given these externalities and these stakeholders, so what do you think are some of the challenges? Now, I don't have a pose everywhere for this one, but just as a discussion, what are some of the challenges that you believe or feel that an Oilsands operator would have? Again, think of that elephant example again, somewhere in the middle, you've got all these externalities that you are creating, and then you've got all these stakeholders who have got, their different set of expectations. So what kind of challenges does that create for an Oilsands operator? So one, just to kind of prompt the discussion, one would be just the question around legitimacy could be a challenge, right?
Like environmental impact.
Yeah, so reducing or held accountable for the environmental impact would be one.
Well, and also, once you've kind of excavated an area, there's no more economic opportunity. What does the land look like afterwards for people who live there? Does it go back to normal? Is it damaged forever? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so rehabilitation is the big one for them for sure. In terms of, once you're done with the operation, what do you do with the land? Because you already kind of, really change the makeup. So how do you, and then you are also being held accountable to put it back to the same state it was in when you started the operation, right? So that's a challenge for them. And again, really good one that you kind of mentioned, because these organizations have their own special resources focused on that. So they've got departments who are responsible for rehabilitation of lands. I don't know whether has anybody been to Fort McMurray area? Nobody has been there? So I would highly kind of recommend, if you get an opportunity, if you've got a friend who works there, or just out of curiosity, just go out, and they do kind of offer some public tours as well. So you can look them up and then sign up, and they'll kind of arrange everything, because they really want to educate people and show what they are doing. So that will give you a good idea as to what the operation is. But again, right there, when you are entering the area where all these sites are, there is a big kind of sightseeing location, which used to be an old Oilsands site. Now it has been reclaimed, and they have converted into a green space. Again, it's not the same as how it was, but it is kind of way closer. It's pretty nice facility. People go there for picnic, and you can do all of that. So yeah, so that's kind of part of the challenge, and then they also kind of address it. But you are right. Any other challenges that you think of? Getting support for projects, for example. We all know about what's happening to the pipelines. I mean, Oilsands is constricted because they don't really have enough pipelines to dispatch their final products. But at the same time, they are not getting the support for those projects. So that could be another kind of challenge that they need to address.
Also, the fact that the energy is not renewable, and so they know that their business is limited in years, so that they're sure that they will not produce forever this non-renewable energy.
For sure. So again, if I understand your comment correctly, so you say, another kind of challenge for them is that the business that they are in is not renewable. So ultimately, they're going to run out of it, of the resource. Correct?
Is that what you meant? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah. Anybody else? So earlier on, there was a question, when we were talking about, the expectations. So one of the kind of the ask was to be able to see, how organizations identify which areas to target in the CSR and how to go about it. So again, that's what you exactly do, the process that we just followed. So you understand who your stakeholders are, what are your externalities, what your stakeholders' expectations are, what kind of challenges are being created within the sustainability space, and then you try and can address those through your CSR efforts. So one example would be, so if you've got one challenge of legitimacy where the community as a whole does not get it, or they're like, you know what, this is dirty business, you know, they're just they're not aware, and you're not getting the legitimacy. So how do you address that? Through education. So you open up your doors, you bring people in, you've got communication efforts, you go and invest in education, you go and invest in, you know, all those sort of things, so that you are able to address that concern. Same goes for the environmental degradation, or where you kind of use a resource or land, and you need to kind of put it back together. So that's where you got to put a lot of focus in terms of doing the R&D and actually doing that rehabilitation work, and making sure that people understand and see it. And there's a lot of work that these organizations do too. And so a lot of their CSR effort would be targeted towards that. Another example, for example, I had was a drug issue. So if you realize that in your community you have got this drug issue that is indirectly an externality of your operations, so how do you address that? So maybe your CSR efforts need to be targeted towards those. Maybe you kind of join hands with an NGO which helps, you know, people cope with drugs issues, or kind of go and educate, you know, high school students to kind of stay away from that. So that's how you kind of, you know, pick up the areas where you can potentially target your CSR efforts. Does this make any sense? My question, especially to the person who asked that earlier question, does this help you understand how organizations go about identifying areas for CSR efforts?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, the other golden rule that I would like to add is that you always want to kind of target CSR activities which are tied to your business. And you're going to see a lot many times in the organizations where the CSR activities that they get involved with are more which they were passionate about, or they've, you know, maybe the leadership was very passionate about or was involved with, and as a legacy it just kind of, you know, continued on within the organization, and does not really have as much relevance to the operation that they do, or their stakeholder expectations, or their externalities. And the organizations have, you know, are starting to realize that and moving away from it. And Finning is a good example, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit later. But just to make that point, so traditionally we had great collaboration with United Way. So Finning was really ingrained with United Way, and we were doing a lot of, I would say, efforts with United Way. All the contribution, donations, everything kind of was targeted towards United Way, and it was a great partnership. But a few years ago, we changed directions because United Way partnership was not really tied to our business operation, wasn't really tied to our externalities or our stakeholder expectations. So now we have moved towards supporting STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. So we have kind of joined hands with a couple of organizations to really kind of promote that, because in a way that is tied to our industry, that kind of gives a skilled resource to the industry and to us in the future. And that's where we feel that a lot of the future is for sustainability, R&D, all of those good things. So that's one of the shift that Finning did, and a lot of organizations that I see are making as well, to make sure that the CSR efforts are tied to their business operations and their stakeholder expectations and externalities. All right, so let's take a few industry examples, but let's just take a quick pause here. Any comments or thoughts up until now? Anything else that comes up that you would like to be addressed as we go through the rest of the session? Or everybody is ready to go through these industry examples that I picked up?
Marisa has one.
I just had a question. Was it challenging to move away from the United Way? Like, even though you're going to help another organization, I feel like there might be some kind of backlash or negative, you know, repercussions of moving away from an organization.
For sure, and I think challenge would be a really light way to put it. I think it was, I won't say use the term disaster, maybe somewhere between disaster and challenge, because from a CSR efforts, I mean, Finning was so much ingrained with United Way and such a great partnership. And, you know, it was throughout the organization, we had a lot of groups and people who were on the board of United Way, and they were so active involved, had been doing it for a long time. So it was a big shift. And when the top executive kind of made this change, yeah, there was a big backlash, and people were really upset about it and very negative about it. So, yeah, so the top leadership had to kind of do some damage control, and they had to kind of, continue to kind of educate people that, this is why we are doing it. And honestly, people are still upset about it. But at the same time, with time, people are now understanding it, and they're getting more and more engaged in that. And I was personally involved in a couple of sessions too myself. And once you kind of do that, then you get a better appreciation of what the benefits are. But answer to your question is yes, there was a big kind of backlash, a lot of dissent in the organization, and some people are still not happy with that. But it's a bit of a transition that's happening. But every organization has to do that, and any change is difficult. And in the CSR space, because usually people do that out of their passion and their own, volunteerism and all of that. So it makes it even more personal to them, and that change becomes more difficult to manage. Really good question. Anybody else? Okay, so let's cover a few industry examples, and real quick, we'll have to save some time for Finning case study as well. So does anybody recognize this site? Do you recognize this scarecrow doing the Michael Jackson pose? So this is basically the Oilsands tailing pond. So basically this is where their final effluent, they kind of spread it out and they kind of, evaporate that before disposing it. So it's really toxic materials. And the reason why they kind of put it there is to save this from happening. Now, some of you may recall this picture. This was back in 2008. Anybody recalls this picture or this incident?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit so that everybody can appreciate it?
I was in like grade 8 when it happened, but I remember it was a big deal. Flock of ducks landed in a tailings pond.
Yeah, so there were 160 ducks who died at a Syncrude tailings pond. And what happened was that they've got these guns, water guns that they have inserted there to kind of scare them off and make sure that they don't really kind of, get close to the water. I think there was a malfunction, they did not work, or they were not sufficient, and that resulted in 160 ducks dying. So there was a big uproar, and that was a stark reminder as to, this is one of the impacts. And do you recall, or anybody else recall what kind of fine Syncrude paid for that? They did get a lot of negative publicity, which was good because that did kind of change their behavior, and the industry realized, and they made a lot of investments. $3 million. $3 million. That was it. If you kind of think about, what kind of, these are huge companies, right? They're kind of playing billions of dollars, and they were fined just $3 million, which was, not even a hand slap. But anyways, I mean, this is one example of, sustainability challenges that the organization face, and they need to be held accountable for that. And since then, they have kind of done quite a bit of efforts. So things have improved, but they still have these tailing ponds, and the risk is still there. So this one is from Shell. Some of you might be wondering that, what does Shell has to do with this solar energy? But again, this example is pretty interesting. It's a recent one. So what happened was that Shell has kind of partnered with a company called Husk Power in India, and that company is basically a startup, and that does small, microgrid alternate energy solutions like this one. So Shell, in fact, has made some investment in that, and in fact, Shell has made investment in a couple of other clean energy companies as well, like Orbit and Cleantech. So my question to the group is, what does this tell you? I mean, why is Shell doing it?
It improves their image to have a renewable energy source as a part of their company.
For sure. So again, you're right, because they are trying to get away from the from their image, which is, they deal with non-renewable energies. So they're trying to, join hands with the renewable or alternate source of energy to kind of get that branding, that legitimacy. For sure. Anything else?
Well, any company that has like that long run sustainability in mind, like you were talking about, does have to invest in some of those solutions. Just moving forward, like if you actually want to be sustainable, you do have to move away from oil and gas. So investing in startups like this is probably a wise move.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that could be another reason why they are doing it, because again, from a diversification and long-term own sustainability perspective, because again, if they define themselves as an energy company, they don't define themselves as an oil company or non-renewable energy company. They are an energy company. So that kind of entails all sorts of energy. And if the non-renewables are going to go away, they need to kind of start venturing into these non-renewables. And this is one of their ways to kind of do that. Maybe it's a little bit down the road, but that does kind of give them that first-hand experience in this area. Because again, talk about this Husk Power, they made an investment of $20 million, which is just peanuts, right? I mean, for a company like Shell, with again a revenue of hundreds of billions of dollars, I mean, that 20 million is a really small, but again, that kind of gives them a lot of publicity, positive publicity, because they are investing in non-renewables, and also gives them the experience that they can also potentially explore or expand into non-renewables. But again, tied to something which they had a challenge with, and they are kind of making investment in the same area. So pretty smart move. So this is the Finning example of STEM. So I already kind of talked about that in detail. So I'll just kind of skip this one. But again, the relationship is that we do rely on a lot of technical resources, and they are becoming less and less available to the industry as a whole. And moving forward, that's going to be critical for the success or of the community and the industry. So that's why we are investing in this area, really kind of introducing these STEM concepts to students early on, so that they get the keen interest, and then they follow these, further education and careers in those areas. Volkswagen. Did someone hear the Volkswagen emissions scandal? I think it was last year.
Lots of head nods.
So can anybody kind of recap that for me real quick?
Sarah's got it.
Oh, sorry. I don't have any of the technical terms. I don't know exactly, but basically they were making some of their reports saying that their emissions in their cars were a lot lower than it was to meet regulations, and then they were selling the cars that weren't meeting standards to consumers.
Yeah. So again, I mean, they were cheating on emission standards, and what they did was, and which was really unethical. I'm like, it's just, you cannot really kind of think of an organization like that doing it, but they had created this software, which was a smart software. And what it did was that whenever the car was being tested, it used to recognize that it's being tested and used to change the performance parameters. So that they would pass the test, and then after that, they will just kind of go and not meet the emission standards. So that's what the technology was. That's what they were doing. And what happened was, there were 3 master's students who were doing some research, and they kind of picked up a sample, and their sample included Volkswagen too. And that's where they found that, hey, these numbers just don't make sense. So first they thought that was their error, but then they continued to do their validation, and then they raised the alarm, and then this kind of came about. So as a result, Volkswagen was fined, I think about $3 billion US. That was the fine. And the total cost was about $33.6 billion, including the recalls, legal fees, and the fines. And and there was a lot of negative publicity too, right? So which they are still trying to recover from. So again, that's another example where companies can fall into that trap, because again, it's the balancing act. In this case, they thought that they can get away with that, which was wrong to begin with. And then the consequences were pretty deep, pretty heavy on them. So another good example, this one is a positive example from Amazon. So again, Amazon has partnered with Hasbro, which is a toy maker. So has anybody dealt with Hasbro at all? Bought any gifts from Hasbro? My daughter is a big fan of them. And one thing that I've always struggled with, that they put a lot of packaging on their products. So now with Amazon, they have partnered up and they've created this simpler packaging that you see on the left, which is for online orders. Because think of it, I mean, online orders, the people are not looking for that fancy packaging because you are not going to have it on display. That's not part of the decision or purchase process. They've already made up their minds, so you can just kind of send them in a simple packaging and really reduce your impact. So that was a pretty interesting innovation that Amazon did. And if you are interested, Amazon has got a pretty it has got a one page on their website on packaging innovations, because they are working, and there's a lot of packaging waste that they create, and they're continuously working with their suppliers. In fact, this year they have introduced these guidelines for their suppliers, and if they do not meet those in terms of packaging use, and if they go over, like for example, they kind of use a bigger package for a small product, they get fined. So they are driving that behavior. So that's good. Because in a way they are finding their customers to drive the right behavior. But for them, that's the right thing to do. So they are going about it in that fashion. So that's a pretty positive step. Any comments or feedback on this example? Do you see any ulterior motive behind this one?
Saving costs on transportation.
You got it. So because there is a big benefit for them for reducing costs, because again, if you get this packaging on the right, you have to kind of package it again. You have to repackage it. There's repackaging material. You have got a bigger package, transportation costs, storage costs. So yeah, so there is an efficiency benefit as well. In fact, I think that's a bigger benefit in the short term. But again, they kind of combine both these efforts, and then they're moving down this path. Good call. So just gonna keep moving forward. So this is a similar example from Chevron. So they've kind of started to put these electric charging stations in their gas stations in California. So that's where they have started. Again, the question for the group would be, why do you think they are doing it? So to me, this would be very similar to the Shell example. So they're doing it for diversification, plus some branding exercise, because again, the future is electric. So they need the earlier they get into the game, the better, because that's one of their diversification strategy, because otherwise their distribution model may go away or may be way less profitable. So that's what's driving this. And this is another interesting one. Some of you might have seen that. So there's a supermarket in Southeast Asia, I believe, which is using banana leaves to package vegetables. So biodegradable, pretty, and this is not new. I think this has been done in the past too, but now they're doing it more on a commercial basis. So what do you think? Why are they doing it? What's driving this move?
Biodegradable.
Yeah.
It kind of adopts like kind of a cradle to cradle technique, like using kind of like the waste or like an unnecessary, or like a byproduct that's not useful for something else.
For sure. And then there could be a cost benefit to that too, because again, in the area where they are doing it, I mean, the banana leaves, they are not being used for anything else, and they are available. So they are able to use that at a lower cost. Now, the same resource may not be available at other locations. So that's the limitation, but there could be something else, which is a similar alternate that other companies could use too. So pretty neat, simple, but at the same time, very effective. Okay. So does anybody else, any other example that he or she would like to share with the group in similar lines?
Not seeing any.
No? So we'll keep moving. And now let's get into the case study. So again, I did kind of mention earlier on Finning that I've used their last two sustainability reports as a base. So what I'll do is I'll kind of start with a bit of a background on them, and then kind of go over the some of the key points that they've covered in their sustainability report, talking about their journey, what they're doing, what are some of the kind of progress that they have mentioned, and then I'll kind of also add some commentary as to, does it make sense, or because again, from an insider view, I did get some additional information, and I'm very passionate about sustainability, so I'll kind of add some of my comments and would again expect some feedback from you too as to what you think about those efforts, what's driving that, are they good enough, what are some of the areas for improvement. So a little bit of background of Finning. So Finning is a Caterpillar dealer in Western Canada, plus South America and UK, Ireland. So there are 3 regions within Finning. So it's a pretty big global organization, but its main business is to sell Caterpillar equipment. And Caterpillar is a big manufacturer of heavy equipment. So they manufacture construction equipment, forestry equipment, mining equipment, power systems, and Finning as a dealer sells and services all of those equipment. So in terms of business model, think of a auto dealership at a bigger scale and with exclusive rights in a territory. So just like your local, I would say, Toyota dealership, I mean, they do not manufacture the car, but they work very closely with the manufacturer to sell and service a car. So the dealership in the equipment space, Finning has a similar model, but it's a little bit more complex because of the nature of the products and the size of their territory and the alignment with Caterpillar. So that's kind of the business model. So pretty big organization operating in 6 countries, 13,000 employees, 200 locations. So it's pretty big. And in terms of their business, so they sell equipment, they sell parts and service, which is on the product support side, and then they also sell rental and used equipment. So the total revenue is around $7 billion, just to give you a bit of a sense. And their customers are in construction, mining, power systems, forestry, and government. So these are the main customer segments. So this is kind of a slide on Finning's strategy. So I'll kind of start with the stuff on the right. So I'll let you kind of read this through. I won't kind of read it. So it kind of highlights what the purpose is, what's the vision, and what are the values. So that's kind of the Finning purpose, vision, and values. And on the left, they talk about what are the strategic pillars. So you've got customer in the middle, and then you've got the 3 strategic areas that you focus on. You develop people, you perform, which is your operational efficiency, and then you innovate with new ideas. So those are the 3 kind of key pillars, and with the customer in the center. So a couple of things that I would like to highlight in here. So if you look at the purpose.
Oh, hang on a second.
Yes, go ahead.
So the our purpose?
Yeah, our purpose and our vision.
Can you read the our purpose for us? Because the picture is over top.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll read it out for you. So we believe in partnering and innovating to build and power a better world.
And then I think we need the vision too, sorry.
Vision, yeah. So I'll have to read that too. I'll see if I can move this. Is it better now? Okay, vision. Leveraging our global expertise and insight, we are a trusted partner in transforming our customers' performance.
Perfect, thank you.
So one thing that I find is that if I look at the purpose, it does not really mention sustainability, right, directly. So that's one thing where it falls short a little bit, because again, if you're truly a sustainable organization looking to doing the right thing, there should have been some kind of a mention, which I don't find. Now, under values, we do talk about ethically. So we act ethically and honor our commitment. So that aspect is there. But other than that, if you look into this strategic slide, there isn't any direct mention of sustainability. But at the same time, they're looking to build and power a better world. So maybe that's kind of assumed within that, but there's no specific mention. So now Scott Thompson, who is the CEO of Finning, he counters that, because the same observation he counters with this comment in the 2018 sustainability report. I'll just kind of read out. So Finning's purpose cannot be separated from sustainability. And then he kind of goes on and he kind of explains what that is. But even in the sustainability report, I think either he kind of realizes the gap in the vision and purpose, or feels a need that needs to be explained and tied to. So he kind of makes that a statement right there in the sustainability report. And I must say that, you know what, all of you would have studied this at school already, that top leadership commitment is absolutely critical for any I would say any major change effort in an organization, let alone, and sustainability is no different. And that's where it starts. And Scott Thompson kind of joined the Finning organization, I think around 4 years ago, and he has gone. He's heavily involved in that, and he has kind of really led by example. And even the change from United Way to STEM was his kind of brainchild. So he's really behind that, and that's why we are able to kind of see some of those changes come through. So yeah, so that commitment is there, but I do kind of find that, you know, that mention is missing in the vision, but he covers that through this statement, the sustainability report. This slide is not that clear. I'll just kind of walk you through it real quick. This is from the 2017 report, which was the very first sustainability report, believe it or not, that the Finning created. And that kind of shows you the state of affairs, because prior to that, Finning was doing quite a lot of things, including the United Way, but there wasn't a thought process or a really structured process behind it. People were doing, and again, for a company which is as big as Finning, 30,000 employees, I mean, there wasn't a concerted or one single strategy driving the CSR effort. It was like people were doing their own thing. But again, there were still a lot of positive things being done in different areas like people, safety, environment, community, governance. So all those things were happening, but they were not happening in a very structured way. So in 2017, Scott Thompson, he really kind of pushed hard to develop and release the first sustainability report. And I think that was a key milestone. And that kind of really started that planning process. And then, you know, what are we going to do? And what he laid out in the 2017 sustainability report was in 2018 and beyond, we'll do the gap assessment. We'll really kind of define what, you know, what's a roadmap moving forward, and then we'll kind of engage all the stakeholders and we'll make sure that we are committed to it. So that's kind of what he laid out in 2017, which was good. And last year I did present on the 2017 sustainability to the same class with Deborah. So it was really interesting for me to kind of go back and compare that statement with the 2018. Now we have the 2018 reports. So we'll be going through that, but this is what was communicated in 2017, and this is what the state of affairs were.
And Etty, I'm
Yeah.
just going to give you a heads up that we have 10 minutes left in class.
Okay, good. So what they did was, I mean, in terms of the alignment, one of the key things which is highlighted in the report is that they have aligned with the SDGs. Everybody, I'm assuming, is aware of that. So there's a clear-cut agreement that we are aligned with that overall. So that's a big statement which was missing from the last one. There's a governance model which has been put into place as well, with the board providing oversight, you have the leadership providing strategy, then the committee, which is coordinating all the efforts within the regions, and then you have the teams implementing. So now we have got a governance model which has been established, again, really positive because that was missing before, and all the different levels of the management are included. And they also kind of laid out a roadmap. So these are the 5 areas: people, environment, products, community, and ethics and governance. And they are, you know, double-click items as to these are the areas that we're going to focus on. So overall, looks good. When I kind of looked at them closely on the people and environment front, I do find that there's quite a bit of meat. On the product side, I think it's more where they're using stuff that we are doing anyways to kind of get some mileage under the sustainability, some of the stuff that you are doing under competition pressure or customer expectations, but you are trying to get the benefit on the sustainable side because there are some benefits. So I didn't really appreciate that much. But definitely on the community side, it seems that it's really light, that we are not really making as much investment. As you can see, there's just one bullet point there. So that's kind of the overall kind of observation that I have. And then they talk about some of the improvements, and we'll just go through those real quickly. So they talk about the safety performance. So again, I won't go into the detail, but they really kind of highlight some performance metrics, which gives a positive picture. Now, having said that, we had 2 fatalities last year. So all your metrics go down the drain if you killed 2 people. And there is no mention of that in the report. So again, that's, to me, it's a little bit questionable, right? How can you not mention it or acknowledge it? Inclusion and diversity, again, there's been huge focus in that area. A lot of training for the executive senior leaders, HR people, and a huge focus in increasing women in leadership, because that's a big area where the discrepancy exists. So a lot of good progress being made, as you can see. So we have got some significant gains in that area. So we've got women participation in the leadership roles. Now, one thing that I found was there was such a relentless focus on that that also going to raise a lot of questions as to, are we going about it in the right way? Because a lot of people in the organization felt that, you know what, some people were getting these roles without really being ready for it. So I think there was some negative externality because of that, but there have definitely been some benefits in terms of getting some actual numbers. So a lot of investment in people training, but again, to me, that's just, you have to do it as part of the business anyway. So they're just trying to leverage it to get some mileage under sustainability, but they would have done it anyway. So I don't really give them any credit for that. On the environment side, they talk about developing a methodology to track greenhouse gas emissions, which is good, really good. We did not have that before. But what really kind of does not impress me is that they highlight that we reduced the emissions by 4%, which is not that huge. And I'm pretty sure if you did not even have a system to track it, you did not have any concerted effort. It was more like what you got anyways, and you're just reporting it. So to me, it's just try to kind of get some mileage out of something that you did not really do much about. But that's what organizations do. And again, our products, we already talked about it. So they talk about autonomy, because there's a lot of focus on the autonomous truck, but that's more on the from the customer side and competition. There is a lot of environmental benefit because these are way more efficient trucks and more productive. But at the same time, I mean, is it really driven by the sustainability motive or with the productivity motive or profit motive? Community STEM, we already talked about it, so there is some good progress there on that front. So I won't go into the detail, but I'll just take a quick minute to talk about this dichotomy, and that's what Deborah had kind of pointed out earlier. Because on one hand, Finning does this a lot of work in the community in the oil sands, but on the flip side, oil sands is a pretty huge impact on the environment. So how do you reconcile these two? So any thoughts from the group on that? When you see that, I did walk you through the sustainability efforts that Finning is making. So what do you think of this dichotomy?
I feel like they have a lot of big plans, but there's not a lot of concrete evidence that they put those plans into action. So they have a lot of talk, but not a lot of evidence.
And I think Finning is not the only one. I think a lot of organizations are in that. And I think that's the transition that needs to happen. And that's where I think, people like you can make the difference, who are more, sustainability aware as you go back into the organization, start having those conversations. Because again, even today, even though everybody understands that this is the right thing to do, they are not doing enough. There are a lot of good things happening, and changes are coming, but not quick enough, and there's more to be done. So I think that's kind of my message from that. So I do have this kind of case study here. We are running out of time. So Deborah, I don't know, do you want to take it as as an assignment that people do it, or do you want me to quickly walk people through it and maybe have a quick discussion?
Yeah, I think that I would let them complete it outside of class and bring it back for their mark. But if you want to introduce it to them, that might be great.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a pretty self-explanatory, and I think it would be a good one, because now that you've been through the session, it does kind of talk about a real life scenario where, a company is kind of faced with the ethical dilemma. And they've got these competitive pressures, regulatory pressures, and profit pressures, and then the right thing to do. So again, the question to you is, what would you recommend, and what would be your, why? And then if something changes, if your competition does do something different, then would your recommendation change? So again, there's no right or wrong, but it's just that the thought process and the discussion. So I think it would be a good case for you to kind of go through.
So I'll just say that if you can just write answers on the back. This isn't a high level assignment, so I want to see that you thought about it, but I don't need you to carefully craft a response. Just show me that you have some good thoughts. When you bring it back to class, you'll get your participation marks. And remember that this counts twice for participation, which is what I've mentioned. So yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Eddie.
Yes, I'm just going to go through the real quick. I'll kind of walk you through the key takeaways just in a quick minute. So again, the first one is CSR to me is a necessity. So it's not a luxury or nice to have. This is what you need to do. So it's pretty important that the organization do that. Again, kind of think about that long-term sustainability and the stakeholder management externality. So you are accountable for it. So it's just a necessity, not a luxury. The good thing is that firms are adopting it and they are getting better at it. But at the same time, a lot more needs to be done. And in a lot of the cases, the motives are more driven by either profitability or branding or getting the mileage or just kind of repackaging something that they're doing already, which needs to change. And then at the same time, there's some significant dichotomies exist too, just like the one that we talked about just now on the finning side, that on one hand, you are talking about all these sustainability efforts that you're doing, but at the same time, you are supporting an industry which has a lot of challenges in that area. So how do you reconcile that? So no easy answers, but we need to start looking at it. And one of the key messages is that it's a balancing act, just like that elephant example, trying to kind of make its way through that tightrope. Organizations have all these pressures from their stakeholders and their externalities. So they need to kind of balance all of that. Again, no easy answers, but you need to kind of keep all those considerations and have that long-term perspective. And the suggestion for you is that everybody has to play their part. So in your organization, as you go out, I mean, you need to understand what the right things to do are, what are the challenges, what are the outcomes, and then make sure that everybody understands that and you are making the right decisions so that we are able to sustain not only the business, but our environment and our communities so that we could have a better future for our next generations. So with that, I'll thank you for your time. And I do have a feedback service, so Deborah can send out a email later. So it will take a couple of minutes. If you could fill it out, that would be fantastic. Would give me some great feedback.
Thank you so much, Etty, for this.
You're most welcome, and thank you very much for actively participating. I know it's challenging, especially with me not being in the room, but I thoroughly enjoyed your participation, and hopefully everybody learned something. So yeah, please feel free to kind of add me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active, so if you want to connect with me there, or if you got any questions, so feel free to reach out. My contacts are on the screen.
Excellent. Thank you so much.